Welcome to episode 9 of The Catch Up, a podcast from the Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullen, and I'm the publisher of the Daily Catch.
And I'm Emily Sachar, the editor of the Daily Catch.
In this podcast, we discuss stories that have appeared in the Daily Catch. We give you insights into how we put the stories together, offer additional observations, and discuss where the stories may be heading as we move forward. Emily, let's get ready and catch up.
Let's do it, Walter.
So our first topic is about a story that we ran last week on the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. There were rumors that they were in Red Hook and there was a raid. How did the rumors start?
As far as we can tell, the rumor is actually centered around one individual with whom the Daily Catch spoke on Friday. This individual, I believe, was intending to be helpful, but the rumor that he spread, which was based on secondhand and maybe even third-hand information, which was itself flawed, created a crazy stir and spread like wildfire, not just in Red Hook, but also in Rhinebeck, creating panic among both the immigrant community, but more importantly, and really interestingly, among those of us who are not immigrants. My phone began to blow up Friday morning about the raid that supposedly had taken place on Thursday. And throughout the day, I probably got more than 100 text messages and phone calls and emails from people saying, why doesn't the Daily Catch have a story? You have to figure out what's going on. It was madness. I've never seen anything like that in the 4 years we've been publishing the paper.
So this centered around the Red Hook barbershop, is that correct?
Initially, it wasn't clear what exactly it centered around. We were able to determine that the locus of one of the purported raids was the barbershop, which is located across from Town Hall. But then there were rumors that things had happened down in Rhinebeck as well, necessitating, we were told, the mandated closure of restaurants in Rhinebeck, another rumor that was completely and totally unfounded. I'm very pleased to say, however, that we have wonderful sources in both communities, and we were able to refute the rumor fairly rapidly. So one of the ways that we refuted the barbershop rumor is we were able to connect with somebody who has a video camera trained on that property. And there was no evidence in 48 hours of camera footage that anything had transpired in the parking lot. We then talked to some of the businesses that we had been told closed because they were either raided or were afraid that they would be raided. And we found out that they had closed in some cases for reasons having nothing to do with ICE. For example, we reported that Arroy in Rhinebeck closed because they had a plumbing problem and a family emergency. The Red Hook barbershop closed because there was a family activity from the 4 brothers who run the shop. It is really important that we refute these rumors and dispel them. We were criticized by several members of the community who felt that we were trading in rumors by merely reporting the information that we were able to gather. And I really took issue with that because what we have to remember is that our attempts to protect the immigrant community sometimes are misplaced. And there's nothing that hurts the immigrant community more than letting a rumor sit out there that is unfounded. It creates a lot of chaos within their community, and many of them don't speak English, so they don't know if they're reading the information correctly or translating it correctly. So it's really important when rumors are out there that we do the job of using our expert reporting skill to untangle what has happened.
So let's go back to Friday. And you said, from our point of view, this started with one contact that you had. Have you gone back to that contact and asked him or her why he or she thought this was true?
He said that he had heard from several of his friends, and I asked him, can you explain exactly what happened? And as I interviewed him, it became clear that he was using secondhand information, that he hadn't seen anything himself, but he had heard. And this is like that game of telephone we all play as children. You know, by the time you're 2 people away, what you've heard is completely different. And people then add on their own intelligence, their own suppositions. And before long, you've got something that's wildly different. And in this case, completely inaccurate, totally inaccurate. We have no evidence that ICE was anywhere in the community, anywhere doing anything on Thursday.
And these rumors can have many consequences. It can put fear in the Latino community. It can hurt business owners if their workers are afraid to come to work. And it can also aid ICE agents by helping identify possible locations they can go, right?
Yes, and I think there's also a lack of, to add on to that, a lack of understanding about how complex the immigration system is. So, for example, the four barbers who operate the Red Hook Barbershop have an active application in with the US government. And for us to presume that every Latino is equal, all are created equal, they're all here illegally, they're all doing something they are not supposed to do, is just patently false. And it shows how naive all of us, many of us, can be in the way we assess risk. So it's very important for people to understand that we bring a certain kind of sophistication, expertise, and access that the general public does not have, and that we will be very careful. We make very informed decisions about what to publicize. When we protect a citizen, it is because we feel they should be protected. And when we choose not to protect the identity, it may be because they have said they are comfortable having their name out there. I will add on to that we layer an extra layer of security around vulnerable populations, which is to say, and that's not just Latinos or immigrants or anything of that nature, it's also general vulnerable people who may not have ever worked with the media before. So they may say, fine, talk to me, I'll be glad to talk to you. And then we realize that they've said something that could hurt them. We are careful to protect them. We don't assume that just because somebody gives us access to their conversation, to an interview, that we may use that conversation in the way that we would use with a sophisticated, media-trained, executive or government leader. We have
So
a
while we're on
special and different threshold with those people.
So while we're on this topic, we get a lot of tips from readers, and tips can be everything from there's a car crash on Route 9 to I saw aliens in the frozen food aisle at Hannaford's, right? The tips can be many different things. How do you, as an editor, evaluate the tips that come in and decide which ones are worthy of chasing down and which ones you just need to walk away from?
That's probably born of 35 to 40 years of experience as a journalist. But when we hear rumors that are tied to a big national story, in the case of the aftermath of the chaos in Los Angeles last week, I took very seriously the rumors, and also the sheer number of rumors that I was hearing told me that if for no other reason than to answer the many people who were contacting me, we needed to follow that particular tip. Sometimes I can tell that a tip is unfounded. I know what the person's referring to. I know that it's false, and I can chase it immediately or I can dispel it immediately. I would say we take every single tip seriously, and we catalog them in our minds as to which ones to follow and which ones not. Some tips also, Walter, are news tips, and we need to follow them immediately. Other tips are more long range. I have a tip that so-and-so might be staging a bid for elective office in Rhinebeck this fall. That doesn't need to be chased immediately. But the notion of ICE raiding a local storefront, that's something we would check into immediately. And I will say that the other way that we dispelled this rumor was I hung out at the barbershop for several hours, and then I got a tip to go back that there was no action when I was there. There was nobody there. There was a sign that the barbershop was closed. And then I got a tip that the barbers had arrived and I should come over and take a look and talk to them. We actually know the barbers because we've done stories, or a story, I should say, about them when they first opened their shop several years ago. So it was no problem to go over there. And then I was able to talk to them directly. Were you, any member of your family, detained by ICE? No. And so on. And then we were able to convince ourselves that this rumor was completely unfounded.
So any more follow-ups on this story? We'll just continue to be vigilant and
Well, I think the most important follow-up came from the federal government late Friday that the Trump administration had changed its guidance on illegal immigrants who are working in the hospitality industries, restaurants and hotels, and in the farming industry. Now, they didn't talk specifically about barbers, but they did say that they wanted agents to focus on illegal activity, criminal activity, not on people doing the important and crucial tasks on which our economy, especially here in Red Hook and Rhinebeck, depends. So I think for now, things are calm, things are quiet, and we will, of course, pay attention if federal guidance should change or if we hear something else.
Okay, good. Let's move on to our second topic for today, which is the Democratic Caucus in Red Hook. One of our readers referred to this as the Raucous Caucus, which I thought was very appropriate. The saga continued this week, so let's jump right in. It was disclosed by the Daily Catch that the Democratic Elections Commissioner Lisa Jessup asked her counterpart to help her with a problem in this. Tell us what happened and why.
Yes. So I have to back up and tell you a little bit about how caucuses must be noticed. That's the verb. We think of notice as a noun, but in this case, noticed, meaning how they must be posted and how the public must be informed when a caucus is going to take place. One of the rules is that the caucus notice, which is a little poster about 8.5 by 11, has to be delivered to the Board of Election headquarters in Poughkeepsie for Dutchess County. It has to be accepted. A Republican and a Democrat representative, one from each side, stamp it in, and then it has to be posted on a bulletin board. Now, this sounds like an antiquated procedure in 2025, but nonetheless, this is the law that a Democratic-controlled legislature has passed and updated almost every year for the last number of years. So Sarah Imboden, the Democratic committee chair for Red Hook, emailed the notice in on, I believe the date was May 18th or 19th, well ahead of the 10-day requirement for noticing the caucus. And she expected Lisa Jessup to print it out and post it on the wall. That didn't happen. We don't know why it didn't happen. We don't know whether Lisa Jessup overlooked it or neglected it or printed it and left it on the side of her desk. We don't know precisely, but we do know that as of the several days before the caucus, it wasn't there. And on May 28th, just a few days before the caucus, and outside the window, I mean, within the 10-day window, but too late, that caucus notice was not up. So Lisa Jessup went into her Republican counterpart, Eric Haight, and asked him for a favor. She asked him if they could work together to agree to allow her to post the notice, bring it in, stamp it, and post it with a note that it had been emailed on time, that it hadn't been printed, but it had been emailed, so that the spirit of the law had been accommodated. And Eric Haight said no. He said, "You're right, it's a technicality, but the law is about technicalities. And this is a part of the law that we simply cannot overlook. This part of the law must be adhered to." So that left Lisa Jessup with a problem.
At that point, when Eric Haight said we cannot do that, what should have happened?
Well, I'm not one to say what should have happened, but what people expect would have happened, and I'm choosing my words very carefully here, is that Lisa Jessup would then inform Sarah Imboden, the Democratic committee chair in Red Hook, "Houston, we have a problem. The notice did not get up on time, and you are hereby alerted that it is not advisable to move ahead with your caucus." Why not? Because if you hold a caucus, elements of which have been posted or not posted, and there's essentially an illegal caucus, you run the risk, which is exactly what happened, of the caucus being challenged. And this is a kind of challenge, it's called a fatal flaw. That's in quotes, a fatal flaw. It cannot be overcome by anything. It's a violation of the election law, and it's cut and dry. It's open and shut. So absent that activity, absent that notice, Sarah Imboden would not have known that her caucus was illegal, right? But our reporting continued. Would you like me to continue with the
Please
saga?
do. So let's just go slow. So the caucus did take place.
The caucus did take place. The question that we were left with, Walter, as editor at the Daily Catch, is did Sarah Imboden know that she was potentially hosting an illegal caucus, right? Because if she didn't know, that's of interest to the citizens of our community. She had done everything she could. A fatal flaw happened, and perhaps she was going to have to host another caucus. But at least she wasn't in the crosshairs. But what we later learned last week is that she was informed that the caucus would be a fatal caucus and it would be an illegal caucus. And she made the decision to proceed anyway. What she told the members who receive her email newsletter is that she spoke to counsel. She didn't say legal counsel, but she spoke to counsel who advised her that the caucus would withstand successfully a legal challenge. I don't know who she spoke to because the Daily Catch spoke to a man named Joe Burns, who's one of the state's leading election experts, formerly worked at the state elections board, and is an expert. He's memorized the 985-page election law. He can quote individual pages and sections by heart. He said this would never have withstood a legal challenge. And she was ill-advised if in fact she got that advice, but if nothing else, she should have pulled her caucus. And so here we are today, Monday, June 16th. On Sunday, she informed the people who receive the Red Hook Dems newsletter. So that's citizens, that's Democrats, that's anybody who signs up for that listserv, that a new caucus would be held.
So the old caucus is now invalidated.
Not yet, as far as I know. There will be a hearing on Wednesday, but we are told by both Eric Haight and Lisa Jessup that it will be invalidated.
So do we know when the new caucus could be held?
We do not know. It will likely be sometime after the primary, which is ongoing right now, ends on June 24th, because there needs to be at least 10 days notice. So I would think it would be sometime after the 4th of July weekend. It must be held no later than July 23rd, so it can be validated on July 24th.
We do know one thing, though. We know there's going to be a lot of attention on that bulletin board in Poughkeepsie.
That's exactly right.
Gosh.
Now, something else has come up out of this, Walter, that's very interesting, that I just learned again yesterday, which is the Red Hook Democratic Committee is talking about moving to a primary system in the future. We've talked about this, Walter, you and I. Why are primaries a safer and more secure bet? Well, primaries, as we know, usually have early voting options. So if you're going to be out of town on the day of the primary, you have usually 7 to 8 days ahead when you can vote. There's on election day, typically a 15-hour window during which you can vote. And you can also vote absentee. And the rules of a primary are very well known to voters. People who are persistent and attentive voters know how to vote in their local elections. They know how to look up the place to go. They don't have to worry that they don't know. They know they vote at Mill Road Elementary School. They vote at Star Library. They vote wherever. Not so easy with a caucus, right? It's a different place every year, every time. So that's a very interesting development. One thing that our readers can look to us for is stories where we will talk about what those implications might be in our community, which has, as you know, Bard College, which itself can be a very large voting block. So if we have a primary and the Bard College voters, who, by the way, will not really be able, most of the students are gone, will not be able to vote in the upcoming caucus, but would be able to vote in a primary. Now, the primary will not be relevant for this selection of candidates for town board, but will be, if they do it, relevant for upcoming elections. There's another reason why this next caucus needs to be held. When the results are nullified, assuming that they are, the candidate for town clerk will also be bumped out of contention. That's Deanna Cochran. She's the only Democrat who competed for the spot, so she was automatically put on the ballot for November. But if this is nullified, she won't have any access to the ballot. She won't have a way to run because she's not an independent. She hasn't put together an independent write-in campaign, and the date for that is long past. Tonight is the Republican caucus. I don't imagine she's going to compete in the Republican caucus. So she would not have been listed on the ballot. What would we have had to do in our community? There would have perhaps been a write-in campaign, but she needs to be on the ballot for the Democratic Party.
But you're saying she will not be on the ballot for the next caucus.
No, she will be. I'm saying she would not have been had the Democratic caucus results not been nullified, not been voided. So when the new caucus is held, she'll compete yet again.
Will this new caucus be exactly like the last one? It's almost just like a redo.
Well, in terms of where, we don't know where it will be held. I would imagine that the committee, the Red Hook Democratic Committee, is anticipating perhaps even more attendance. We don't know what day of the week it will be held. The May 31st caucus was held on a summer Saturday afternoon. It attracted 242 voters. So we'll have to see what happens with the next caucus. We don't know where, we don't know when, we don't know time. So a lot to watch out for. We also don't know, there's another very important change. We know that Kenny Migliarelli and Christina Ducharme intend to put their names up for contention yet again, although they are already on the ballot as independents under the homegrown Red Hook Party. We also imagine, although I have not confirmed it, that Christine Kane, the incumbent on the town board already, will put her name in contention. There's now time for there to be still other candidates because the rule of the caucus states that names can be put into contention right there at the caucus. There's no signatures that are necessary. There's no process other than that you need a person to nominate you, a person to second you, and you have opportunity to give a 3-minute speech, as it were. So it's possible we could have 4 candidates, 5 candidates. We don't know. It's start from zero, reset the tape.
Do we expect an even bigger turnout because of this raucous caucus story?
Yeah. By the way, I want to say about raucous caucus that the caucus was actually not raucous. It was very well run by Sarah Imboden, from what I hear. So I think what our better headline for now is chaos after the caucus.
Chaos after the caucus.
Caucus chaos.
The other piece of this that we just have to make a nod to is we believe that the boat club story has been driving a lot of this impassioned participation in the caucus. And what did happen this past week in the boat club story is Robert McKeon and the boat club people have agreed to a sit-down meeting to talk about a potential public-private partnership.
That's correct.
So that could be a way to simmer down some of the sentiment around the boat club story.
It's possible. We'll have to see. To finish up my answer to your other question, it's hard to know in middle of July what kind of attendance one would get at a caucus. I think there's certainly the same passion, but whether the people will come out a second time, you don't know. Whether new people will come out that weren't at the first caucus because they couldn't be here on that weekend. So there's a lot we just don't know at this point. But I would expect that the turnout will be strong.
Will we know the caucus date this week?
I don't know when we'll know it, actually. I don't know when the Democratic Committee is planning to announce.
Well, as soon as we know it, our readers will know it. So
that is right. We are pushing out stories. The minute we hear them, it takes me about 15 minutes to get the stories together, and then they're out there.
There you go. So to close out our podcast, we're going to continue with our new feature called Ask Emily and Walter, where we answer questions that you, our listeners, send in to us. So please email your questions to me at walter@thedailycatch.org. Today we have 2 questions. The first is from a listener in Red Hook who asks, now that you have a managing editor, what is his role and how does he interact with you in your role as editor-in-chief and also in your role as a reporter?
Great. So I'll take those one at a time and help me out, Walter, if I forget one of the legs of that. Actually, 3-pronged question. So Jake's role is as managing editor to support me reading stories and helping our reporters report stories. So at the most basic level, that is his job. And that means that on any given day, we're talking to usually both of our current reporters, Elena and Claire, but if not every day, then at least several times a week. And he's editing stories as they come in, as am I, and sending them back to the reporters with questions, and then moving them into production. So we both do those roles, but Jake is here to help me, and that's an incredible support. You asked as well, how does he interact with me in my role as a reporter? So I need editing too. Every reporter, when they're in that role, needs to be edited. So for example, last week when I was writing the stories about the mishaps with the filing of the notice for the caucus, Jake was reading, we say reading behind me, backing me up, reading my stories and asking questions and making sure that my stories were as airtight as I expect all of those reporters to be for the paper.
So that's great. So now, since we're talking about our team and how our team works, I think you have a question for me, Emily.
I do. I would like to know, and I think readers would, what is your role as a publisher? And maybe tell us how you became the publisher of the Daily Catch.
Well, I became the publisher of the Daily Catch. I started off on the board. This is now 3 years ago, and I enjoyed being a board member. But we needed a publisher. We did not have a publisher in place. And my background, which was in marketing and working for large corporations, was a good match for that publisher role. So I was asked to step into the role of publisher, and I happily did so. So what a publisher does basically is I care for all the business side of the organization. Largely what I have to do is spend time raising money. Because we're a nonprofit newsroom, we have to raise money both from readers and listeners, from foundations, and also from local businesses. So a big majority of my time is spent coming up with advertising ideas for businesses, running large-scale fundraising campaigns, dealing with major donors, and putting out applications for grants from foundations. Then there's sort of the business side, just caring, making sure the lights stay on and the bills are paid and what have you. I'm in my swim lane and you're in your swim lane, Emily. I don't mess with your editorial stuff unless you want me to. I suggest stories here and there if I see them.
Especially about Amtrak.
Especially about Amtrak.
Especially about Amtrak. That's your favorite topic.
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. So anyway, that's basically what I do as a publisher, is I care for the business side of the house. And I think part of why our partnership works so well is because first off, we work very well together, but we do have those separate areas.
We're also very meticulous, each of us, with our respective responsibilities.
Exactly.
I want our readers to know that, our listeners today to know that.
Exactly. So just a reminder, please email your questions to me at Walter@the Daily Catch, and we will answer them on one of our future podcasts. This concludes this episode of The Catch Up. We hope you enjoyed listening. A big thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help producing today's episode. Emily, I always love catching up with you.
I love our podcast. I love our partnership, and I love our listeners.